Taoiseach, the whole issue of inquiries has been very much in vogue, with a lot of chatter over the weekend, but I think that the focus really has been on the wrong inquiries, because it's quite clear that the toothless banking inquiry is not going to expose anything except maybe a few politicians to a bit of badly needed publicity. And I think that it's dawned on a lot of citizens now that the Oireachtas inquiry into banking has about as much chance of getting to the bottom of what happened in the banking sector as you have had in asking Billy Bunter to find out who robbed the school tuck shop. It's a joke. So instead, I'd like to maybe refer you and ask you to focus on a different inquiry, one which might actually have a chance of succeeding if you had the will to set it up, and set it up in an appropriate manner. And I'm referring to the statement yesterday by the broad cross-section of academics, NGOs and public figures presenting a cast-iron case for why there should be a holding of a public inquiry into the policing of the Corrib gas project. Now, everybody accepts that our mechanisms for Garda accountability have been found to be not fit for purpose. So isn't it logical, against that backdrop, that one of the longest-running police operations in the history of the state, in an area deemed to be the most heavily policed in Europe, coincidentally in your own backyard, an area where there were over 100 complaints to GSOC, would you not agree with me that this is actually obviously an area that should be the subject of an independent inquiry, that such an inquiry has been sought for a long time now by both national and international human rights campaigners such as Desmond Tutu and the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights Defenders? The reality is that the campaign yesterday outlined 22 reasons for why such an inquiry needed to take place, ranging on issues from the lack of legality of arresting people without charge, protesters being hospitalised, phone tapping, retired Gardaí working for the IRMS and Shell, and the fact that all of the regulatory and monitoring agencies have been demonstrably shown to have been subverted by Shell. So, Minister, the question I need to ask you is, are you aware of the meetings of the Shell Committee of Managing Directors in London prior to the commencement of the Shell project, which discussed about whether they had sufficiently well-placed contacts in the Irish government and amongst the Irish regulators, an instance which they said they'd investigate further and which set the scene for everything else that followed? Are you aware of the continued police harassment and intimidation of the local community, including a very serious incident in Pula Thomas the weekend before last? And if you're not aware of these instances, will you make yourself aware? Will you visit the residents, your constituents, and tell them how you reconcile this with your previous statements that we're on the cusp of a new Garda regime?
First of all, I'm glad to note that the political policy, regulatory structures and banking governance will be examined by the Oireachtas Committee, free of any direction from government, free...
Sorry, could we deal with one topic here, please? Thanks.
Free of any instruction from government, and free to do as an Oireachtas Committee can do under this new Act. That is, make their own determination for their terms of reference, for who they should examine, who they should call.
Sorry, please.
The period that should apply. And I take scant notice of the comment from the side by Deputy Martin, who was involved in a decision where there was a private inquiry held into banking with a specific time limit, admittedly carried out by a very competent person who did 140 interviews, but it was a time-constrained private banking inquiry. I think it's only appropriate that the Oireachtas Committee, under the new Inquiries Act, should be enabled to hold a public inquiry into the issues of governance, regulatory authorities, policy positions,
Sorry,
and so on.
what topic are we dealing with here? Thank you.
That the members of the committee will play their full part in what is a matter of real substance and of interest to the Irish people, that this should never happen again. I'm well aware of the 14 years of difficulty in respect of bringing to shore the Corrib gas field. I understand that tunnelling has finished in the last few days, and that the tunnel will now be backfilled and the pipe to bring the gas ashore put in there, and that gas should flow from the Corrib field in the next within the next 6 months or so. I think that's an issue to be welcomed. I'm also aware, Deputy Daly, I've had occasion in the past to visit members of the Rossport, Porthomish area when they were in Wheatfield prison. I've had engagement with them over the years. I've also had engagement with the many Irish people working on that site over the last 14 years. I'm not aware of the minutes of the meeting of the Shell committee meeting in London before this began, but I am aware that when this was first put in place by Enterprise Oil, that it was badly handled in the beginning on many sides, and as one more notable than I said, were you to do things again, you might do them very differently, or some things not at all. In any event, I welcome the fact that the standards employed in the Shell development are of the highest standards. That in that area, Deputy Daly, for the last 14 years, there have been between 200 and 2,000 people working on a daily basis, which has had a very significant financial and economic injection into that locality, which I know very well. And I do hope that the field will be brought ashore for the benefits of the people in the next 12 months.
Thank you.
Therefore, given all of the files that exist on this, given all of the court cases that exist on this, given all of the decisions made on this, I don't agree with you that there should be a full public sworn inquiry into policing efforts at the Shell development in Ballinaboy.
Deputy Daly, 1 minute, thank you.
Well, I think you've very much clarified matters for your constituents, Taoiseach, which is probably one of the reasons why Fine Gael has diminished representation now on Mayo County Council, because you seem to be very well versed with the propaganda of Shell, as indeed has your colleague sitting in front of me here. Maybe you got that information on your visit in February, where you took the time out to go to Shell and meet them on site, but you haven't showed the same enthusiasm to meet with people in your area. People like Mrs. McGrath, within whose kitchen you previously felt comfortable enough to make a cup of tea. And yet this woman, a 73-year-old woman, is manhandled by Gardaí, 30 of them, outside of her pub in the early hours of the morning between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. less than 10 days ago.
Please.
The subject of Garda manhandling. Now, Taoiseach, you have told us before that new commissioner, the acting commissioner, represents a new police force. I would ask you to make contact with this family who you drank tea in their house before your elevated status, and ask them what happened. Because the man in that house has had a stroke over what went on. He was in his bedroom listening on the street to his wife being manhandled by Gardaí, and young guards jeered at that man, made fun of him, knowing his health, asking him to come down. Are you going to once and for all deal with these issues in the area, and can you tell us how this possibly represents a new Garda force? Is it not really indicative of what we've been saying, that the force needs to be stood on its head if you are going to get to the truth and get a proper police service that acts not as hired hands for a
Sorry, Deputy, would you please put your supplementary question? Thank you.
But instead serves constituents and residents.
I don't know whether you know all the people down there in that locality, Deputy Daly, or not, but I do know most of them. And the vast majority of those who caused all the trouble down in Ballinaboy were not from that area at all. They were imported serial protesters who went out of their way to cause trouble, who cost the taxpayer here 25 million in overtime costs for Gardaí, one of whom lost their lives in the middle of all of this. I don't accept your arguments at all that all of this trouble was caused by people from the locality. Yes, I've been in many of their houses, and I did go down there recently to look at the standards that have been employed, and to speak to Irish engineers, to speak to Irish environmental engineers, whose careers, Deputy Daly, depend upon the standards and the quality of work that they've implemented here. And you yourself would be welcome down there to see those standards. I respect, of course, the difficulties that are faced for any local family. But believe me, this company has worked with local communities in so many areas, from providing opportunities for young people to have scholarships to fulfill their educational potential, to so many other community issues in a way where they've grown with the community.
Thank you. Thank
you. What you don't want, or what Deputy Hannigan doesn't want, is to see the product of the Corrib fuel coming ashore. And I will welcome very much, Deputy Daly, the day that Corrib gas flows through to the terminal in Ballinaboy.
Thank you.
It has provided an economic lift, an economic injection that in many ways has shielded that locality from the recession that affected the rest of the country, where up to 2,000 men on many occasions were working round the clock and providing that terminal. And that's something that you and your fellow deputies have never referred to, that people have built their houses, paid off their mortgages, got upskilling, training for young people, not just to work on that plant, but in so many others. And the benefits of this will be seen when the gas actually flows, and I welcome the day that it will flow, because I can testify from my own experience the quality of the work that's gone in there, the standards that apply, and the lessons that have been learned. And there have been lessons learned, and not the least of which was people from outside my own county, travelling very long distances from outside the country to give vent to their professional protester hysterical speeches on the road outside Rossport.